as Tyler said, I'm the CEO of the Living Future Institute of Australia, and our global vision is to catalyse a world that is socially just, culturally rich, and ecologically restorative. And we very much use the built environment as a vehicle to create that change. We run something called the Living Building Challenge, which plays very much in the regenerative space. Sort of how we talk about it is, look around, imagine every single thing that goes into a building, every single act of design and construction can make a positive impact. And I think, as you saw in the video, part of the framing that we use is shifting mindsets away from sustainability is thinking about how do we get incrementally less bad, whereas regenerative is what does good look like, and using that as a starting point instead. And that's a profoundly different place to start in. It's a place of opportunity. That being said, I'm looking forward to hosting tonight's conversation. And with any good regenerative design decision, every part plays multiple roles. So maybe you're a roof that generates electricity and collects water and also is an urban farm. That's going to be me tonight. I'm absolutely going to be hosting, but I'm also probably going to chip in with my perspective as we go as well. So looking forward to the conversation. All right, on to our panel. So welcome everybody. I'd love to hear from each of you, just as a bit of an introduction. How would you start to explain who you are? And then maybe let's start with the leading question. What does good look like to you for Sydney? David, I might start with you. All right.
Does that work? Yes. No, ladies first, just so everyone knows. Ladies first. I'm not dismissing it.
No worries. Kate.
Hopefully this works. Hi, everyone. So my name's Kate, and I am the creative director of Purpose Conference, which is a 2-day immersive conference that's taking place in October at Carriageworks for the purpose-driven business community. This is the first year that I've worked on the event. I've been a long-time fan, and when the event went on ice in 2018, I had always a long desire to try and reignite what it was and to bring it back, and so we're very excited as a team to be bringing it back. In terms of what my view of is as Sydney and the future as a regenerative city, I think a collaborative place in which we are working together as a united front towards a regenerative society is the most important thing. I feel like there are silos in Sydney that I've been witnessing emerge, whether it be, my background is in the arts, and we have a lot of incredible creative minds, and then we have a lot of brilliant scientific minds. We have wonderful people working in finance, but how do we connect all of these people together to solve this problem as a united front? So connection and consciousness. How do we wake up the people who walk past us in the street who aren't aware of the urgency of this situation? So consciousness and waking up is a huge part of this. So that's what a good Sydney looks like to me, is consciousness and connection.
Beautiful. Thanks, Kate. Varsha?
Hi everyone, so my name is Varsha. I am currently a climate justice and mental health awareness advocate. I work at Equity Generation Lawyers, and they do really cool climate litigation stuff. I'm a paralegal there, and then I also work as a coordinator at a South Asian climate justice organization called SUPNA. So a lot of my work centers around the representation of South Asian people, but in saying that, I also want to acknowledge that being a South Asian in Australia, I inherit significant amounts of settler privilege. I think that just really needs to be emphasized. And yeah, a large part of my work centers around justice. So when I think of what a good Sydney is, it's one that places most of its emphasis on justice. The fact that First Nations people should also be leading this is something that I think is really important, because I've been in the climate movement for a few years now, and it's generally been a very white and upper class inner West Sydney kind of space. And yeah, that's something that I think that needs to change, not only in the climate space, but then also when we look at other areas like health. So representation and the notion of justice is what's really important to a good Sydney, in my opinion.
Hi folks. First of all, I'll just introduce myself. So I'm David. I'm in the Indigenous Leadership and Engagement team at the City of Sydney, which my office is just there. So I say I work with the city. not for the city. I've been there for probably nearly 17 years. I'm a block baby. Does anyone know Redfern? Redfern? Come on. Yeah. This is interactive. Yeah, the block? Oh, okay, that's where I was born. My family are from central west New South Wales, which is Wiradjuri country. So I will acknowledge my elders past and present, acknowledging also the sacrifices they've made and the paths that they have forged. Very good friends with Uncle Phil, and through this invitation of Regen, we have seen the value of what Regen is setting to achieve, and that's how I've become involved in the game with Uncle Phil. So I'm going to try and share a few of his Uncle Philisms, I call them, and Laura touched on one earlier. How do we live in this land with joy? I hope to pick up on some operative words. I'm just coming back to your question. I love Jeff Bridges. Another question for the crowd. Did anyone see The Big Lebowski? Come on. Well, what was he there? He was the dude, all right? So I'm just going to present myself with all humility as the dude. That's what I am. I'm just a dude cruising through, right? I was taken from my mother. Her heritage, my heritage, goes back 50,000 years. The waters break. I had to reconnect with that. And in that journey, I now aspire to be the greatest expression of myself. So what I do here is I see good Sydney. I'm going to raise you. I'm going to raise you one. Great. How do we become the greatest expression of ourselves in this global city? So that's what I orientate to. I don't impose that on anybody because I know what imposition feels like. I went to a Catholic boarding school in Hunters Hill. Some of you might know St Joseph's College. That was destitute. But it taught me some very profound, powerful lessons. So in orientating to becoming the greatest expression of ourselves, it's an invitation to let go of maybe the indoctrination that we've starting to realise that we've been imposed on. What I call the feducation. I was feducated. Again, observation, not judgments, folks. So I always say this, and we're going to come back. I'll probably finish on this little point. You've got two eyes for two reasons. One is instinct and the other is intuition. And allow them to complement your education. But we come from a learning. And our learning comes from behind and it goes forward. And that is one of those acts of humility. One last little point I'll just pick up on my brother Jeff Bridges. Never met him, but I love him. He said, take care. So I'm going to see the T and I'm going to raise you to M. Let's make care, right? Because take puts us back in that destructive cycle, does it not? So I just offer these things up. Let's be really clear on every letter of every word, of every sentence, of every paragraph, of everything we are doing, so it is abundantly clear and there is no ambiguity. And when we want to reconnect with First Nations around the globe, don't impose on them. Cultivate a space, co-create a space that provides enough value for them to want to be included and the benefit gets shared. So that's me for now.
Something you said when we were chatting over there was the invitation is important, and that it really struck a chord to me there. It's the welcoming of every voice and welcoming into the space, the opportunity to contribute rather than the imposition on any particular person. I wanted to, I guess, add my 2 cents. Again, working very much in the built environment. Hard to follow, David, and your beautiful words, particularly Jeff Bridges. I love but the built environment, a stat that's thrown around quite often is that it's responsible for 40% of the carbon emissions in the world. It uses a huge amount of the global materials and is part of the destruction, but equally on the flip side of it can be part of the solution. And the opportunity there, as we think of a city and all of the things that goes into it in a really kind of concrete way, is how do we build habitat for humans instead of human storage boxes? How do we build lives and communities and generations of people who love living here? And it's such an opportunity, particularly given how much is going on in Sydney. Right now, there's development going on in Circular Quay, there's development going on here in Tech Central. And we know more now than we ever have. So as we build these big skyscrapers, I kind of reflect on something that we were told through a Lend-Lease workshop, which was, be mindful that you're pouring concrete on song lines, and what's the responsibility in that? And that's always stuck with me. All right, Kate, when we were having a chat just over there, you were really expressing to me the sort of desire you had to gather in this time. Why do you think gathering is important to a regenerative future?
I don't know about everyone else here, but the bushfires prior to the COVID pandemic was a really pivotal moment in my life. I changed course of my career. Everything made sense. Everything kind of came crashingly into focus. It was followed up by a sense of urgency to do something. And then there was COVID. There was this disconnection from others and community and the ability to gather and problem solve. And I feel like in that isolation and in that time, luckily my fear and anxiety caused me to change course into this fantastic new work that I'm doing. But for a lot of others, it's solidified into fear and inaction. And in that anxiety and fear and inaction and isolation, these huge challenges that we're facing can seem very overwhelming. But together in the room, whether it's just 50 of us or it's 500 of us or 5,000 of us, there seems to be a sense of potential momentum that just isn't there when we're alone or when we're online. So yeah, I think a physical reconnection and gathering to tell stories of hope and share solutions and connect those with influence and power with those with ideas and wisdom is essential right now. And yeah, that's what I'm hoping to bring to Sydney with purpose.
Beautiful. And Varsha, it was really lovely to hear that you were part of this panel when they told me just a couple of days ago. I'm so interested in, I guess, the responsibility in this moment that's been placed on youth, and how just does that feel? And in what way are you finding both hope and challenge in that?
Yeah, with youth, it's almost like, oh, okay, the young people have to deal with this world that's, messed up, and some of the adults will be like, oh, I'm so sorry, we've left you with this, and it's like, okay, thanks for the apology. Don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. It's not stopping the emissions. Cool. So I think figuring that out has been interesting, because a lot of adults do value your voice as a young person, which is incredible, but then there's also the lashback, and a lot of politicians will immediately discount you and be like, you're 19, you're 15, you're 20, you don't actually know what you're saying, you don't have experience, wait a few years, and then you'll realize that you don't want to pay high taxes, and it's like, wait a second, I'm already paying high taxes, none of this makes sense. And I think figuring that out has been tricky, as in like, what is your actual place in solving something that is so much bigger than you? So I was one of the organizers for the climate strike, School Strike for Climate in 2019. We had like 350,000 people across Australia. That was incredible to see. And that was people, not just young people, but your nurses, your unionists, everyone coming together. And I think it just goes to show that with young people, it's not that we want to lead this movement, we just want to bring everyone together. And I think that notion of gathering is so important again. And yeah, that's been the whole point. It's not just that we want to put the burden on young people, and I don't think it's fair to do that as well, because in terms of what we think of like what our future careers are, whether we want to have children, all of those things are heavily impacted. And I think in Sydney, we're actually quite privileged in many ways, in the sense that we don't suffer a lot of the impacts, because like a lot of my work now centers around like Indigenous people in India and the communities there. Their voices are never heard. They're, you know, when we look at the media and which voices are amplified, we aren't seeing their voices. Like even when we think about the heat waves, countries like India and Pakistan have been experiencing heat waves for like months now. We haven't really heard about that. But then the UK has a heat wave for a week, and we all know. And we're like, oh my God, it must be so bad. It is really bad, but it's also happening everywhere else that we don't talk about. So I think for young people, it's just amplifying different voices. It's not just their voice that needs to be there, because my voice certainly doesn't need to be there everywhere. It doesn't have as much to say as so many other people do, but it's a collection of voices.
David, as somebody who I've heard you share your story a couple of times, and just picking up on this idea of, I guess, voices and whose voices are heard. In sharing your story, it's always occurred to me that you're such a wonderful bridge person. You're able to share experiences that are so personal to you, but that gives us a window into how to hear different voices, but also create relationship with different voices. I wonder, how does that feel, and in what way could we all be bridge people in our lives?
Oh, jeez. I've got about 1 million voices in my head right now. You can have one of them. Yeah, like I think... thanks, Varsha. I think I might have met you. Were you on a stage up there at the Sydney Town Hall, possibly? Yeah, okay. I was, yeah. I think one of the things I just work with purpose, right? And you know, we often see it coupled with meaning, right? You know, I hear purpose and meaning all the time, and that's great, right? Also, I would say that's good. Again, greatness to me looks like I aspire for true meaning, not just meaning to be true, right? I made that one up too. So that's another one of those voices, you see. So what I've found is that I need to do these little, you know, we all heard of the elevator pitch. I need to do these things. I've realised, you know, and by the way, I also want to just, again, a little humility with my ancestors. I didn't choose to be at the city. My ancestors chose me to be here. And that's part of that journey from me coming back to Redfern to reconnect on all these different things. So, you know, when I first met Alice, you know, just being the dude, I said, well, we've been eating donuts for 50,000 years, you know. We've been gathering for 50,000 years, more. You know, the beauty of this continent and its people, which are all of us, is we've got two timelines. We've got one that goes backwards, that continues to go backwards, and the one that we share going forwards. And I just put this caveat up. We don't have a shared history until we come to terms with the truth-telling of this country. And as I was suggesting earlier, you hear some fanciful terms of, what I shouldn't say fanciful because we're working with them, but designing with country, caring for country, connecting with country, respecting country. Has anyone heard those terms? Well, as Uncle Phil says, unless you are designing, connecting, caring, respecting us, we are country, and country is us. And what we come from is a descriptive ideology. It's pretty simple. We describe what we see. And I think I saw in one of the Regen, you know, this yearning for a better understanding of place, our moment in time, and our connection with it. Well, we hold the key to that, people. And we've been wanting to share that. But again, just orientating back to this piece. it is actually a little bit disingenuous for people to come up to me at the city and say, hey Dave, we want to connect with Aborigine values with no humility and contrition. Are you prepared to admit that what you have done to us and to the environment in the past is where we are at now? And that is often extremely challenging. So that's part of that orientation piece there. I guess that I'm talking about, I gather every day. We've got a gathering here. And I think just one sort of other piece to it, if I may share this, is, I think one of the things, we want drive-through and fast everything, don't we? And that makes life a little bit easier. But what I understand from different processes, and I can talk, we can talk about that beautiful artwork up there, that is reflective of and interpretive of songlines. And I was involved with the brief that went out for that. And I'm talking on the Woolworths building. So ladies and gentlemen, go and have a good look at that later and have a look at the narrative, right? It's really kind of nice. Did that with the artist. But the point I'm making here is in gatherings, right, there is a commitment by mobs to come to a place that is central, that is neutral, that is giving, that is life. And often that can be around a celestial moment. It could be around the bunyan nut. It could be around different things. But you know what? It's arrived at through dialogue, discussion and agreement, and arrangement is made. Sometimes that can be every 3 years. Sometimes it can be... And it's those sorts of things that then compel us to do the work and do the walk. And that's just something that I don't necessarily see all the time. So another thing for me is it's not what you see in here, it's actually what you don't see in here. And that comes back to the instinct, and that's where the work really lies.
Thank you. I want to pick up on some of your comments around reconciliation and truth-telling. So I guess starting from what are the challenges to a regenerative Sydney? One of the things that I certainly think is that there's a grappling still to be had with where we're at. Part of that is around truth-telling and reconciliation. Part of it is where we are in terms of the environment. And I know we hear terrible stories all the time, but do we really know what that means and where we act from there? And I think that's a huge challenge. I think one of the others is there's a lot of people who would like to talk about doing things, and I'd like to see a lot more action. So those are some of the challenges that I'm seeing in terms of a regenerative Sydney. I'd love to hear some of your perspectives on where there's some challenges. I might start with you, Varsha.
Sure. So I think one of the main challenges I found is just the types of people leading conversations. So I guess in the climate space, I had the chance to do really cool media things and all of that, but I never really talked about being a person of color or anything. And all of us would go through media training and had all these incredible experiences, but not once did we get told to talk about those things, because most of the people that I worked with were white. And, they came from really, really privileged backgrounds. And for them, climate change obviously was an issue and they were really passionate about it. But the way that we told stories just didn't really seem to matter. We'd focus on a few numbers here and there and be like, I love nature and I want to save the planet. And it's like, great, you love nature, you want to save the planet. But I think for so many of us, there's different reasons why we actually care about climate change. For us, it is about justice. It's about basic livelihoods and the fact that knowing that maybe some of your family can't get medicine or basic treatments like dialysis and things like that aren't available because of power lines being shut down, because of floods, back where your parents are from. So I think the idea of representation was something that I found really, really difficult to grapple with, because I thought I was in a really good Sydney at that point, because I wasn't with anyone else who was actually talking about the facts that there were so many gaps in the way that we talked about a future, a sustainable future that we wanted to create, that we wanted to coexist in, without actually talking about who we're coexisting with and the fact that this is stolen land. those conversations tend to be left out a lot of the time. So I would say that was a major challenge, and just the feelings of imposter syndrome wherever you're walking in, just feeling like, you haven't done enough to have the label of being part of the climate justice movement, and slowly realizing that, it's not the fact that you've not done enough, but simply the fact that you just don't fit the stereotype of who's there. I think that was the biggest challenge for me.
Thank you. I was hearing something there around without hearing from all of the different voices and stories and perspectives, we're losing something in the understanding what the motivation is to act in this moment. And in that, we're also losing an opportunity to better describe a future where we all sort of fit in, and making the link between that, which, I guess brings me a little bit to Kate. I'd love to hear about some of the challenges that you are seeing, but also as somebody who's just started this new role at Purpose and maybe seeing some things with fresh eyes, what are some of the small steps that kind of the broader community should know about in order to get involved in this?
Yeah, look, I think one of the biggest issues we're facing is going back to my original comments around consciousness, like waking up to this. The frustration that I feel when I'm encountering someone who doesn't understand the severity of what we are facing as humanity really frustrates me, right? And I think that there's a greenwashing that's happening in corporate culture where people sort of feel I buy the, eco-packaged shampoo and I'm doing something that's enough. So rather than having these tokenistic marketing campaigns, the idea of embedding true change, true purpose, a regenerative model into your business or your organization or your governmental activities is essential. It's like this surface activity has to stop and we have to go much deeper. And that to me has been the biggest challenge, is to first of all come to terms with everybody's lack of consciousness, stop knocking on, like shaking everybody in my community who's not awake, but pivot my attention towards trying to make bigger change by this project is definitely a way that I'm doing it personally. I feel like that's a big challenge.
I think to build on that is, I think we've all been fed the stories of you just need to use a keep cup or whatever the case may be, and that will be enough in order to escape the very necessary and urgent systems change that needs to be done in parallel to that. So individual actions matter, but it's not going to work unless we actually do some serious reckonings with ourselves as well. David, from your perspective, what are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges to a regenerative Sydney?
On these ancestral lands, I see the antiquated, boring, lazy, European, Western consumption over ideology mentality. And the opportunity is flipping that. How do we aspire to ideology over consumption?
I think picking up off some of the things that all of you have saying, and this is a question we did not prepare for, but I'm going to roll with it anyway. It came up in the video too. What's the role of love in regeneration?
I'd like to speak to it. In life and in work, I come across a lot of people in senior leadership positions, again, talking to positions of control and power or seeming control and power, who seem to be very disconnected from these marginalised voices or from people at the front line of these issues that we're facing in Sydney, globally. And they're essentially, their empathy is just disconnected. They're really focused on profit, they're focused on stakeholders, and there's such a role for love and empathy in leadership. Because if we can open that channel to the highest levels of government and corporate culture, where these people with real influence can start to lead with compassion and love, I feel like that's where this true momentum and speed that we need will happen. I see so much love in the room in these grassroots gatherings and non-for-profits and university campuses and rallies, but what we're potentially missing is an opportunity to really get to the top, and love and connection and empathy, I think, is the answer there. How do we get to their heartstrings? That's That's one way. Out of the three. Sorry, I can't hear the question.
Which one comes first out of the three, yeah?
Remind me of the three elements that I said again.
Empathy. Empathy.
Yeah.
I love, David, that you asked for audience participation and they've really embraced that.
We haven't answered it. I love this.
Got all the questions.
That's what you call an invitation.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Do you have another? I think for me, I think empathy comes first. I think if you can empathize with others and understand their situation, whether it be a marginalised community, whether it be individuals on the front line up in the Northern Rivers whose home has been washed away, as soon as you can put yourself in someone else's shoes, you can start to open yourself up to a sense of compassion and love. Okay, good. Did I make the right answer? Good.
Go for it.
I think for me, love has a really big role in the sense that we can create vulnerability. I think the way that I connect to issues personally is through stories. I don't want to hear just numbers, because I think for a lot of us, hearing the parts per million or the percentage of emissions and things is just big number, don't know how to deal with that. But then I think hearing somebody's story and lived experience is something that we can all find a way to empathize with. And I think that's how we create love and create that safe environment where the way we regenerate is not just, by centering the voices that are generally more dominant or that, we've allowed to be dominant in ways or that have been imposed on us, but rather making sure that those who have been oppressed, who have been marginalized, and who should be at the forefront are there, because there is that element of vulnerability. And I think it also allows for greater allyship and being able to realize that, okay, maybe some of our thinking has been shaped by certain standards in certain ways and that we need to reframe that. So I think vulnerability is the most important thing for me, and I think that then creates love. Yeah.
So vulnerability creates the space for love, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah. David, have you got a thought on that?
Yeah, I do. I think for me, it's the intent. Whatever the intent is, again, make sure you articulate it, which is what I was sort of alluding to earlier. And my monkey brain can't help another movie, but, you remember The Life of Brian? The Judean People's Front? And they had this argument about whether they were the People's Front of Judea. I mean, it's one of the funniest scenes on ever. But that's why I think it's important to I'm in engagement and comms from my ancestors. I have a cultural contract. I have a responsibility. I was born with that. Just had to take a breather. At a Catholic boarding school where men in dresses tell you all this sort of stuff, and you've got a bunch of boys, I don't hold them responsible. I'm not pointing the finger at them. I love them. Bless them. But that experience of a little black kid in a very foreign place, and I was the only one there as an Aboriginal man, reading books that told me, as I said before, and acknowledging Pete and everyone in the Regen crew and everyone else. And I've said, Pete and others, the reason I get emotional is because I feel the love in the room. I think you just touched on it, Kate. And the other point I'll just make on that really powerful word, again, with intent, coupled with intent, is the visceral experience that one has with that. And we are all miracles. We are unique. We have so much going on in our internal multiverse that connects us with the external. Just think about how unique and special that is. And by denying people who want to access that, that closes off from the opportunities that opens us up to being the greatest expression of ourselves. So just the final point on that, again, an Uncle Philism, to know thyself. And that was the profound moment for me. When I found myself, I say in my work, I talk to your soul, not your role.
Thank you. I love that Uncle Phil feels here and very much here in spirit and the Uncle Philisms. To sort of build, I think, on some of the points you were making about relationship and love. I grew up in South Africa, as I'm sure many of you can hear, and the philosophy that's very much steeped in that country is a word called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu means I am what I am because of who you are, or that people are only people when they're in relationship with other people. And I think you can extend that to really all living things. And for me, it speaks to, I guess, love in relationship, or it's like love in action is Ubuntu. Which feels essential, particularly when I think all of us working in some difficult things and difficult roles, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it can be despairing, but holding onto, for me anyway, holding onto love is the reason why I do it. That I love this place. I love the people that are here. I love the work that I get to do. And that's the thing that kind of speaks to, what's the role of love in regeneration? Go for it.
Is it conditional love? And if it is conditional, what are the conditions? There are certain contexts, to you we are public, we are strangers. These people on the panel there, they are colleagues. At work, they are friends. So your statement is within context, but what are the conditions for love? Because it's such a
Sure, big questions from the audience tonight. Yeah. I think it has to extend to all of humanity. I don't think regeneration exists in pockets or just loving the people that are like you or the environment that's like you, unless you extend it to all of humanity, all of the beautiful places. It feels like a conditional or almost, I don't want to say vacuous, that's not fair, but it feels empty, and it doesn't feel like the robust, muscular love that we need to make this world better.
Can I touch on
that?
that?
Yeah, go for it.
Great question, brother. And thank you. This is transaction. It's what it is. And I don't impose that on anyone. But for me, love is a gift. And as soon as your point, which is very valid and I love it, as soon as someone expects something back, then it's not a gift anymore. And I think that comes to so many different concepts in humanity that we have with that. And again, don't forget that we have that gift with everything of this place in the past, in the present, and in the future. And what we expect with that humility, subsistence is another thing, is take only what you need, yeah? So I love it, but this is a transaction too, and I don't expect anything from you. It's an invitation for me to come here. It's a gift. And all I've ever said is I'd say it to people who start to know me when I get my dudism going, and that is, beware of the black guru. And that's to my brothers and sisters. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to share our insights with what we orientate to. with my work at the city, right? So yeah, I just bring it back to that gift thing. It's a great question. Thank you.
Hello? Okay, this one works. As we start to sort of round off this discussion, we're each seeing things from a different horizon, a different perspective. Where are you seeing the good stuff? Where are the seeds of this kind of good future that we're talking about? What are you seeing? I might start with you, Varsha.
Oh, the good stuff. We talked about this before, and I was trying to think about it, and I was like, maybe we have a good climate policy, or maybe we're doing something good. And I was like, I don't really know. I feel like it's hard to define good, just because of the types of conversations that we have around it, and what does good actually mean? I was getting all like philosophical, and I was like, this is a rabbit hole that I'm not going to actually find anywhere to go with. But I think the community spirit, especially since we're back outside a little bit, to me, that's what is really, really important. And I feel like that was kind of where I started in the climate movement, and that's why I've stayed, because I've made connections, I've made friends. It's not about LinkedIn, but it's about actual people and emotions and sharing stories, and to me that's been so important. And I'm super lucky and privileged that even my work allows that, and that's the main focus of my work. It's about amplifying other people's stories, and being able to give platforms to those who actually have something to say. And I think that is what's happening more and more. We're seeing different voices come up, and communities come together and back those voices as well, and feel empowered, rather than secluding power in smaller places and certain individuals. So yeah, I would say that's the best thing that we've done.
Lovely. Kate?
I'm so happy that we're finally starting to see the wisdom in our First Nations people, that they for 60,000 years have had the answer to many of the problems that we're facing, and that we're starting to think with a cathedral-like approach, which is the first person who laid a brick in the cathedral. Maybe 300 years later it was finished. So it's that idea of building something where you're not reaping the rewards in your lifetime. We're thinking for the future and having that sense of love that isn't going to necessarily be reciprocated straight away. So I'm very happy that we're starting to see that we have to think with a long-term vision in our business, in our leadership, and in our lives, in our own ancestral line. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
And of course, many First Nations people have had that 10 generations approach for thousands and thousands of years. Yeah. David?
So just remind me the question again.
Where are you seeing, actually move over, where are you seeing the good? For you, where are you seeing the great?
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm going to just share this with you. Does anyone know Rainbow Serpent Festival? Yeah. Did you go there? Yeah.
It's on my wish list.
Okay, so I through different way became the, colonial term, Indigenous liaison with them, right? And long story short, that was appropriation. It was a festival. It was a bush doof. They called themselves Rainbow Serpent. And through music, I connected with them and created a transaction, created some love, created a partnership. We spoke about reconciliation and relationship. Again, I see relationship, I raise you to partnership. Partner, par, is from the Latin term equal. I want to be on an equal footing. I often chuckle at the term inequality. Well, I want to be in equality, but I don't want to be in the Western definition of inequality. You with me? You see? That's why I'm suggesting just be really concise on your vision. Now I'm going to come to the vision, right? So, Nelson Mandela. I'm a big rugby union fan. So who knows the rugby Springboks, yeah? Yeah? They won the World Cup. Yeah. I'm a big... And they've got the insignia. the Springbok. And when Nelson Mandela's ANC brothers and sisters came to him and said to him, what do we do with that symbol of white power? He wanted to use rugby union as a platform of reconciliation because it was a global thing, right? Yeah? And true to his word, Nelson Mandela said, we, in the spirit of reconciliation, we must honour what our enemies cherish. I love that. Uncle Phil suggests to me, we've actually got to learn to forgive too. And that's profound. That is profound. So again, we bring this transaction thing. So I'm just going to bring back to Nelson Mandela. And in his 27 years in captivity, did he ever lose sight of his vision for himself, for his family, for his community, for his cause, for his country? I think we all know the answer is no. We saw Gandhi and his powerful, amongst many philosophies, be the change you want to see. So work with me here, folks. Mother Teresa. Sorry, I'm not pointing to you like that. Yeah. Mother Teresa. I was yearning for her help. I forgot Mother Teresa. You know what she said? If we judge people, we have no time to love them. Well, there's been too much judgment on our people, on our ancestral lands. Look at her vision. And then we've all heard of a man, Martin Luther King. Say it, come on. I have a dream. Yeah? We have the dreaming. So the vision, they all stuck to their vision. Isn't that a beautiful thing? So my vision is to become the greatest expression of ourselves.
Thank you. As we start to wrap up this panel, been debating what poem. I really wanted to end in a poem, mostly because I find that poetry manages to escape our brains and end up in our hearts, and I think that's also an important place to come from. But I've been debating about two poems today, but the one that I'm going to do is incredibly difficult and challenging. So I'll let you know that whilst there's positive notes to it, it's hard, but at the same time, the work that we have ahead of us is hard. And so, yeah, I'd invite you to kind of just settle in as I read this poem from Ayesha Siddique. She's a Pakistani climate activist in New York. And very fittingly, this poem is called On Another Panel About Climate, They Ask Me to Sell the Future, and all I've got is this love poem. What if the future is soft and revolution is so kind that there's no end to us in sight? Whole cities breathe and bad luck is bested by a promise to the leaves. To withstand your own end is difficult. The future frolics about, promised to no one, as is her right. Rage against injustice makes voice grow harsher yet. If the future leaves without us, the silence that will follow will be an unspeakable nothing. What if we convince her to stay? How rare and beautiful is it that we exist? What if we stun existence one more time? When I wake and get out of bed, my 7-year-old cousin with her ruptured belly tags along. Then follows my grandmother, aunts, and my other cousins, and the violent shape of their drinking water. The earth remembers everything. Our bodies are the color of earth, and we are nobodies. Been born from so many apocalypses, what is one more? Love is still the only revenge. It grows each time the earth is set on fire. But for what it's worth, I'd do this again, gamble on humanity 100 times over. Commit to life unto life as the trees fall and take us with them. I'd follow love into extinction. And I think, just let that settle. That last line has really stuck with me. What's required to do this work right now and how committed we need to be. But I think from the roots of love grows regeneration. And for me, it's the only place that this work will succeed. I'd love to just thank our wonderful panel, Kate, Varsha, and David. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and wisdom.